Hey all, in this video we're going to talk about liver disease and finish up our conversation about gastrointestinal disorders. So liver disease is basically a broad term for any disease that impairs the liver's ability to function properly, right? And associated with that is often cirrhosis, and cirrhosis is the scarring of the liver. Typically, it's preceded with fat deposits in the liver, sometimes called fatty liver disease, that then causes tissue damage and sparks an inflammatory process. And as you know, the result of the inflammatory process is inevitably the rebuilding of scar tissue that can impede the liver's function. Of course, the liver, unlike other organs, has the ability to rebuild itself and repair its tissue. So if you have liver disease and you deal with it adequately medically, you can actually get the reconstruction of healthy liver tissue. Associated with this is the idea, or the term ascites. Ascites means the fluid buildup in the abdomen. So you've got these portal veins that are building and delivering significant fluid to the liver. If the liver is impeded with scar tissue or just dysfunction, then what you've got is portal hypertension. You've got a lot of pressure on the vessels in that region that are going to start leaking out, and that's going to leak out fluid, extracellular fluid. Remember, we've talked about this the whole time. The fluid in your body is the same as the fluid in your blood and exchanges from one to another. So you're going to get a buildup of abdominal fluid. Here's an image. That's a somewhat disturbing image, but that is a fairly severe case of ascites, of liver dysfunction, damage, that is causing fluid buildup in the abdomen. The abdomen is basically filling up with extracellular fluid resulting from the backup of flow that can't get through the liver. Then this person's probably pretty close to liver failure, and liver failure is what we talk about when we say that the liver can't basically produce the processing of nutrients that's necessary to keep the person alive. And at that point, what you need is a liver transplant. And we can transplant the liver or even portions of a liver. So a healthy donor can actually provide a portion of their liver as a transplant, and they will actually regrow healthy liver tissue from where they donated a portion of their liver. Okay, and of course, all of this, and particularly cirrhosis, increases the possibility of liver cancer. We talked before about how liver cancer is more likely, or I should say liver cancer is not uncommon because the liver is exposed to and has the job of dealing with all kinds of toxins and stressors. Just to point out this issue of ascites a little bit more acutely, you may have seen images of malnourished folks, maybe in a commercial asking for your support for international development, with images that look something like this. This young girl, unfortunately, is dealing with significant malnutrition, a protein-based malnutrition as well. She is suffering from what's called kwashiorkor, and you can see that her belly is distended there, and that's the result of an enlarged liver that, to some degree, is filling up with fat, and to some degree there is getting larger and larger, and it's pushing out her abdomen. But in addition to that, she's got these infiltrates. She's got this fluid building up because of the portal hypertension that is filling her abdomen with fluid. So it's not the case that she's malnourished and got a big belly, but she's skinny everywhere else. She doesn't have adequate protein or nutrition. Her liver is shutting down, and as a result of that, fluids are building up in her abdomen. In the Western world, more common than that is fatty liver disease, which basically have some of the same origins in terms of malnutrition, and in particular in the United States is associated with significant alcohol consumption. Remember, the point of the liver is to filter out toxins. Alcohol is a toxin, so your liver is going to work really hard to deal with that, and it's going to get injured. So what's going to happen is you're going to get these infiltrates, you're going to get these fat deposits that are going to build up in your liver. Your liver is going to get more and more disease, and that's going to build up into extensive scar tissue, and that's going to stop the liver from functioning properly. It can be a terrible disease, by the way. And then there's also what's called non-alcoholic metabolic dysfunction associated, steatotic liver disease. Is that right? Yeah, non-alcoholic metabolic dysfunction associated steatotic liver disease. Wow. The reason I'm choking up on that a little bit is because it used to simply be called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. But the reality is this is a much more precise version of it. So MASLD is, I think, the acronym that's used for it. There you see it. I'll put it up there. But basically, you can get this kind of fatty liver disease, this fat buildup that then leads to potentially significant scar tissue, irreversible scar tissue in your liver. So I said before, your liver can regenerate. And yes, if you have moderate scar tissue and fatty buildup in your liver, and then you stop the insult, your liver will start repairing its cells. But at some point, that scar tissue is going to be fibrotic, it's going to be sclerotic, and you're not going to be able to repair that. And so that's just permanent loss of liver function, and that's not a good thing. If it's non-alcoholic, where does it come from? Well, it's typically associated with really poor diets, and therefore commonly associated with obesity, type 2 diabetes, which is often associated with obesity as well, and can also be made more likely with high blood pressure, as can many other things. So this is can also be called, is also called fatty liver disease, a much more simplified version. And fatty liver disease basically leads to hepatitis. What is hepatitis? Well, now you know. Itis means inflammation, and hepa is the liver. It's inflammation of the liver. And there's many different causes for that, but hepatitis untreated leads to cirrhosis or serious irreversible scarring of the liver if not managed, and that leads to permanent decline in liver function, which can lead to life-threatening conditions. Let's talk about hepatitis a little bit. Sometimes we break them up in different ways, but hepatitis is an inflammation of the liver. One version of hepatitis is Hep A, and Hep A is an infection caused by hepatitis A virus, HAV we talk about. It's typically a short-term virus. It can range from mild symptoms to pretty severe, and it spreads through the oral fecal route, which means it spreads when somebody has not washed their hands appropriately after using the restroom and then makes you food. And it's not that uncommon in backcountry kinds of stuff. So often people that go on backcountry expeditions, etc., poop in the woods and eat in the woods, and maybe their cleanliness is not as good as it should be. We're not talking about a lot here, so nobody's like, accidentally smearing poop on their lips. What's happening is a very small amount of this bacteria gets on your hands and then gets into your food and causes an infection that causes a significant inflammation of the liver. Vaccination is the most effective way of avoiding this, but the second most effective way is washing your hands thoroughly every time you use the restroom. Good hygiene practices, especially if you're working. This is why we've got the signs in the restaurants that say employees must wash their hands before returning to work, because this is a pretty significant threat. Another possibility is Hep B, and this is a virus that can also be avoided with a vaccine. It spreads through bodily fluids, so this one is not fecal to oral, but this is bodily fluids. It generally presents as an acute infection for a limited time, but you can have chronic Hep B. Chronic Hep B is not curable. It's treatable, but it's not curable. And during the acute phase, individuals will have things like jaundice. Their liver's not functioning, so bilirubin's going to build up, and you're going to see it in their eyes and in their skin. Fatigue, abdominal pain, dark urine, all the things you'd expect if somebody's liver's not functioning properly. On the other hand, somebody could have this infection and have no noticeable symptoms. Nevertheless, it can be very problematic. Hep C, significantly more problematic. This one is through blood contact. So when do you get risk of Hep C? Well, it could be sharing needles. That's a pretty common one. It could be getting a tattoo by somebody who's not real good at maintaining their equipment and the cleanliness of their workspace. And it could be by sexual acts that can lead to a very small exchange of blood. So I'm not talking about really bloody sexual acts. Even just a modest abrasive exchange of bloods would be enough to spread Hep C. Again, this is a liver infection with Hep C virus, HCV. You might have heard of it referred to like that. And it can range from mild short-term illness to serious lifelong injuries. Many people with Hep C don't have any symptoms at all, and then others have pretty serious liver damage and symptoms. And sometimes people don't recognize the symptoms until you have pretty significant cirrhosis and near liver failure. Well, they recognize it before they get near liver failure, but they don't recognize it until they have some significant cirrhosis. So hep C is curable with antiviral medications, but it's a significant life threat. So you want to be aware of that and be careful where you get your tattoos. If you're sharing needles, that's a super, super, super bad idea. And be careful with your sexual activities. Okay, the other possibility for hepatitis, alcohol, that I mentioned before, right? This makes sense. Alcohol is a real stressor, and it causes inflammation and cellular damage in the liver. Then the liver metabolizes alcohol. It produces byproducts that trigger inflammation, so you get the inflammatory process aggressively, even more so than you would just by other kinds of toxins. The symptoms can start as mild and reversible, but can quickly turn to life-threatening, including things like jaundice, significant abdominal pain, chronic fatigue, and of course, in the end, liver failure. The treatment, stop drinking. And folks that are significantly addicted to alcohol have real problems with that treatment. So this is how you drink yourself to death. And the other treatment would be a liver transplant, of course. But a liver transplant, if you're still drinking alcohol, isn't going to do you any good. Okay, other things related to hepatitis. Well, there's autoimmune hepatitis, AIH, and that's a chronic liver disease that can be basically cause is not that clear, but it seems to be triggered by T cell mediated overreaction. So something in T cells is causing the T cells to attack healthy liver cells as though they are a threat. The rest is not that clear. Typically, the treatment is a medication like prednisone. Why prednisone? Because prednisone is an immunosuppressive drug, so it will slow down your immune system and stop it from attacking you. But the real solution is probably just a transplant. Without treatment, life expectancy is a few years probably. I think, if I'm not mistaken, 50% die within the first 3 or 4 years of diagnosis. So not great, but it's basically a genetic predisposition. So all of this leads to cirrhosis. Here's an image that shows you what's going on here. You can see that the fatty liver, you've got some clear damage to the liver, and then the cirrhosis, what you've got is much more significant scar tissue that takes over the liver, and at that point, the liver is just not able to function properly. Here's a graph that lays it out a little bit more clearly, but it begins basically with fatty liver disease, fat deposits, and it gets into cirrhosis and moves progressively into irreversible scarring of the liver that causes or leads to, inevitably, without treatment, leads to liver failure. Okay, but again, the liver is special. The liver has a remarkable ability to regenerate in a way that other organs don't. So if you cut off half of your kidney ain't growing back. Cut off half of your heart, there's a medical term for that. It's called dead. The liver, on the other hand, can regrow and regenerate. We've seen regeneration up to 70 to 90% of original mass from a damaged liver. So even from severe chronic liver damage and cirrhosis, we can get some repair up until the point when the cirrhosis, the scarring, gets so dense and so extreme that the liver can no longer repair itself. And at that point, the option is a liver transplant. What's interesting there is that you can transplant a whole liver from a donor, of course, somebody who's died with a healthy liver, but you can also transplant a portion of a liver, not from a deceased donor, but from a deceased donor, but from a living donor. And that portion of the liver will function and actually can potentially even regrow healthy tissue. So the liver does have options that other organs don't. Okay, basic overview there. As always, I want to warn you that my goal here is to kind of give you a big picture so that you can kind of understand your life options and your health considerations going forward, and to some degree understand how the human body functions and appreciate its intricacy. But having said all of that, there's a lot more to it. So if for whatever reason you're interested in this, or you are fearful that perhaps you have done some liver damage or on the pathway to liver damage, or you have a family member who's got some liver damage, you need to do a little more research. I've given you a basic primer, but man, it's just basic. And I feel like I could talk for another half hour about this, but that's basically all you need for now to kind of, move forward, live your life, and have the tools you need to find out more information when you need it. All right. I'll see you soon.